Alright, what's up guys? We're back here with another video, and today we're continuing our review of all of Stephen King's adapted movies and sequels to those movies. And we are starting the It series. Now there's 3 movies in this franchise. It Chapter 1, 2017, and then It Chapter 2, 2019, which I went to the theater to see. And then we have the original 1990 It, which is what we're reviewing today. I had watched this a long time. I've seen this movie several times. It's a miniseries. It's 2 parts. I'd seen it several times because this was one of the movies that I grew up on. And it being I understand that this was one of the more popular Stephen King adaptations. But I liked the It Chapter 1 way more than the first part of this. Now, It Chapter 2, the 2019, it was alright. It had its moments, but It Chapter 1 was the far superior film out of the franchise. And same thing with this one. It Chapter 1 of this miniseries was better than the second part of the miniseries. Second part of the miniseries really drug on and it wasn't that good. And second movie of It Chapter 2 was just terrible. It wasn't terrible. It has its moments. I'm not going to say it's terrible, but it was alright. But, I mean, It Chapter 1, in my opinion, of the original 1990 miniseries was the far superior part because it had Seth Green, it had that guy that played Clark and The Thing, and it also had Tim Curry in it. I legitimately enjoyed the first part of this. Now, the second part, I never really did like it after I got to grow up and get a real opinion on shit I watch. And the second part just really doesn't do it for me. I mean, it's kind of... The makeup does not hold up well. The effects does not hold up at all in this movie. It's all right. So let's talk about It 1990, the plot. The first half of it, both parts are about an hour and a half to hour and 40 minutes long. And the first part of the first episode of the miniseries, there's 2 parts. And so it starts off with a character... So it starts off usually, and this is how the remake starts off too. Georgie's character ends up... hold on a second here. Georgie's character ends up getting killed by it, but it never shows it in the miniseries. So Georgie gets killed by it, and this puts effect on Bill's family, which is the stuttering kid. And the series actually starts off with I forget what the black kid's name is, but I'm just going to call him the black kid. When it starts off with his adult counterpart investigating a murder on another mutilated little girl or whatever, because there's been a child killer around, not Freddy Krueger. So they find this little girl's body, and the series actually starts off with this little girl's death. So after Georgie gets killed, there's immediately a funeral scene after that. And immediately after the funeral, you see that Bill's parents are kind of not nice to Bill anymore, and Bill blames himself for Georgie's death, and Georgie's death makes him stutter more. This is all plot points. Again, I can't go through every little detail, and I hope you guys aren't watching this just to get a summary of the movie, because I'm not that good at summarizing the entire movie, and I do forget stuff. Just like on Hell on Wheels, my Hell on Wheels review, I forgot to mention that Thomas Durant's second wife ends up getting murdered in the 5th season. Forgot to mention that, and she was actually a pretty well-established character 3 seasons in.
So she was a pretty well established character.
And then I also forgot to mention the real significance of Eva and Elon Ferguson's character. But right now we're talking about it. I think my favorite character in chapter 1 has to be Richie. Now, the biggest part of chapter 1 is basically just the group remembering all their encounters with it. And we get some backstory. It's basically like the backstory part of the story. And then once chapter 2 comes on, it's like there's no interesting aspect to it anymore. The second chapter on the miniseries for me is very boring, and I did not like it. I thought the ending was horrible, and same thing with it, chapter 2. The ending is horrible. Horrible. Those of you who have seen it will know exactly what I'm about to talk about here. The baby face. The fucking baby, it. Oh my god. I was like, dude, that's gonna be a fucking meme. It was bad. It was bad. Their poor choice on the death it. So basically it's just them going through their experience with it. So apparently like when Beverly Marsh, when her experience was she was looking down the drain one night and this blood shoots up from it. And there's blood everywhere. But the dad can't see it. Bill's experience was he was looking through Georgie's room and found this photo album or whatever, and blood started coming out of it, and the picture started moving. That was his experience. The black kid's experience was he was with the friends, and it came out of one of his pictures in his history book. And then Ben's the fat kid. Ben's character... Shit, what did Ben see? I remember what Ben saw in the second one. I mean, the remake, but what the fuck did he see? Oh, God. Oh, yeah. Ben looked out by the sewer building, and he saw his dead dad. And then the dead dad turned into it, and then he looks down in the water, and there's a skeleton down there that tells him you'll float too. It's a pretty creepy scene. I'll admit, the first chapter of this one definitely... hit every note right. I really enjoy the first chapter. But the second chapter was really the one that fell flat for me. And I feel like hardcore fans will be like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. I've heard a lot of hardcore fans. I mean, I know there's hardcore fans out there that do like the second chapter, but I've heard a lot of hardcore fans say that the second chapter is, in fact, not that good. And same thing, I've even heard people say that the It remake was terrible. And that the 1990 It really... Okay, I'm about to tell this story. So I happen to... and only people that read the book will understand what I'm about to talk about. I've read the book about four or five times. And it's probably one of my favorite books, except for one particular scene. And you guys already, those of you who have read the book, already know what I'm talking about. And it did not make its way into any of the remakes. And I'm thanking God it didn't. You guys know what I'm about to say. You know what I'm about to say. It takes place after the sewer incident. Right about at the end of the first part. You guys know what I'm about to say. Chapter 21. Chapter 21. You know it. You know what I'm about to say. Those of you who don't know what I'm about to say, all I'm going to say is gangbang involving Beverly Marsh and the other kids. In great detail, several pages long. See, now we're getting to the story. So I needed to mention that to get to the story. So that was the only part of the book that I thought was bad and shouldn't have been in there. But I was talking to someone not too long ago, actually. And it was right after I watched it, chapter 2, and it was one of my friends, and he was a hardcore fan of the 1990. He's a little bit older than me. He grew up in that era. He was a teenager then, but he said he liked the 1990 miniseries a lot more because he thought it captured Stephen King's writing style a lot. And that's why, well, he hadn't read much Stephen King books, and he thinks that captures Stephen King's style a lot more. And he thought the new ones were a little bit too violent, graphic, and terrible, filled with language. That actually made me chuckle a little bit, because I think the thing people don't realize is the 1990 it was a horrible way to capture what Stephen King actually writes like. Stephen King writes some of the most darkest shit you will ever read. Go read a little story called Mr. Mercedes. It's got 2 sequels. It's got Finders Keepers, and I forget the third one. But go read a little book called Mr. Mercedes, and then come back to me and say that 1990 it is a good way of capturing his writing style. Dude, the 2017 it, even though it was filled with language and shit, it still wasn't as bad as a Stephen King book. I mean, come on. Those of you who have read, I've read several of his books. I've read Mr. Mercedes, Cell, I've read Skeleton Crew, Nightmares and Dreamscapes, Tales from the Dark Side. I've read all kinds of Stephen King books. The Mr. Mercedes series, It. I've read The Shining. I've read all those. Children of the Corn is not, by the way, Children of the Corn is not a miniseries. I mean, is not a full-length book. It's only about 30 pages long. It was a short story. But Stephen King writes some of the darkest shit you will ever read. It is dark as shit. And I think out of all of his miniseries, I do have to say, the only miniseries that I'd give an A+ to, and I enjoyed it tenfold, and it's not even it. It has flaws. Part 2 of the miniseries bogs it down for me. So I'm not giving it an A+. It'll probably get like a B or C. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to give it that because Chapter 2 is a large portion of the franchise, and it's an hour and a half long, and it's boring as hell. So, what would I give the A+ to? I'd give it to a very underrated miniseries, in my opinion. Highly underrated, and I will watch it 100 times. Even though the effects didn't hold up well on it, I legitimately enjoyed this miniseries. I could watch it over and over again. It's a little miniseries called Rose Red. There was a sequel to it called The Diary of Evelyn Rimbauer, but it wasn't that good. But Rose Red is a legitimately good movie, and I highly recommend it. It's a good miniseries. It's like a little haunted house story, and it's just fun to watch. It's a fun movie. I enjoyed the whole entirety of it. Even though you got ones like Salem's Lot and It, Rose Red was really the one that stuck out to me. Really did. So, Chapter 1 is basically just them going through and experiencing it encounters. Chapter 2 was where they come back and, Part 2 was where they come back and they try to kill it forever. And we got to talk about the final confrontation scene. Now, Eddie Karsbach always dies in Chapter 2. And he dies in the remake as well. So that's nothing different here. He does end up dying. But basically what happens is all the friends come back, and I'm going to go through this fast because I didn't expect this review to last too long. So basically what happens is they go back down the sewer, but they go deeper this time, and they find his deadlights, which he's like this giant spider thing, and it's a really lame scene in my opinion. I thought when I was watching this, even as a kid, I was like, that is some shitty makeup. I mean, what the hell? It's like this giant spider thing on stilts, probably. It's terrible looking. And I guess they end up kicking the shit out of it or something. So, yeah, there's that. So I really got nothing else to say about this one. Part 2 has always been the lame one for me. Part 1 was very enjoyable. It reminded me of other Stephen King stories like Stand By Me, which is probably one of my all-time favorite movies. And yeah, Stephen King's 1998 with Tim Curry and Seth Green, and the guy from The Thing. Yeah, I'm gonna have to give this one a B. Part 1 is really good, but part 2 fell flat. So remember to leave a comment, like, and subscribe.